Well, if it isn't a chip off the old schlock. What's up, everybody? I am Darby Ellis Lewis Wilson. This is Chris Anonymous, and we are coming to you live or recorded, depending on when and where you're watching. Chris, speaking of which, give us an update on our what are we doing? What's going on? Our podcast stuff. We're on podcast. We're talking about the 1989 movie Parents. We're going to get to that, but I want to get a quick podcast update.
We are slowly compiling our back catalog into the audio format, and so keep a lookout. We have an episode up now, and in the next coming weeks, there are going to be several dumps of our quality schlock dumps.
We have some big schlocky dumps.
Yep, coming your way.
Yes. So
you want to fill your ears with that?
I've heard several times that this would be much easier for people to listen to rather than watch. Podcasts are a big thing. So we wanted to just make sure we get that out there to you. So I just want to make sure that you guys know that soon, and well, if not right now, we have an episode out right now. I think it's the Wraith. You can listen to us on
depending
Spotify.
on when you're listening to this. Yeah, pretty much anywhere you listen to podcasts, we're going to be there. And if you look there and we're not there yet, check again the next day because we'll be
complain.
There.
If we're not there, just complain. Complaining solves everything. Anyway, speaking of big complaints, Chris, you picked a movie this week. For this week called Parents, 1989, starring Randy Quaid and some other people, but he's the big name, at least for me in this. This movie I don't think was very well received. It cost about $3 million to make, and it only made about $870,000 some dollars. That is terrible. They didn't even make back a third of what they spent on the movie. Apparently critics didn't like it because they felt like it was tonally all over the place. There are too many tones going on. What, is this comedy? Is it horror? Is it satire? I, for one, actually feel like the tone is spot on the entire way through. What that tone exactly is, I couldn't tell you, but I think what it does the entire way through.
I think I will agree with you. 90% agree. There were two times where I thought the tone took me out of it a little bit, but not too much. And then it went right back in. Yeah, I don't know what tone it is, but I do think that they set a tone.
Well, there's not a lot of trivia to give about this movie. I'm sure if you really dove into like the behind the scenes, it got, I don't know, or the commentary tracks for it or something like that. But just in my lazy research, there's really not a lot. Apparently it is somewhat of a cult classic. It does have a little bit of a following, and I can see why. And I think we'll talk about it a little bit later, like the good parts of this movie. But let me explain to you what we do on the show. We do talk about the good things of these movies. We don't just take steamy, schlocky dumps all over them. We talk about what's good about them. We talk about what's bad about them. Then we talk about the schlock, and that is just like the weird things in the movies, the big ideas, things that caught our fancy. But just make sure that you know going into this that we will spoil this movie, and we'll spoil other movies as well. In fact, Chris might spend like 5 minutes explaining the plot of an entirely different movie to you.
Did I do that last week? Was that me?
That may have happened. I think I've done that a couple of times.
Spoils any movie that pops into his head.
So this is a show, podcast for people who love movies and just want to see everything under the sun and just talk about them. But first, before we get into all of that, we like to do a thing called Web of Schlock and figure out where this movie is connected to other things we may have seen. Hit me, Chris.
Yeah, let's the writer, Christopher Hawthorne, he doesn't have a lot of credits. This is his first movie. Then he's had some made for TV movies.
Really?
Yeah. Now the director Bob Balaban. I think I'm probably saying his name wrong, but you would know him more as an actor. Very, very famous actor. I love him. Like great character actor. He was in Close Encounters of a Third Kind, Gosford Park. The thing that you would really know him for is a lot of Christopher Guest movies. He's kind of one of the guys that keeps doing like A Mighty Wind, Mascots, Waiting for Guffman, I believe Best in Show, and just a great comic actor. I love this guy.
Yeah, I didn't recognize the name at first, so I had to go look him up because I thought like this movie is so stylistic. Surely this director has done some other very weird things. And oddly enough, he's not really much of a director. He has done other things, but mostly a prolific actor.
He did Parents. He followed it up. He's done a lot of TV directing, and it's like strange things too, like Amazing Stories, Erie, Indiana, Tales from the Dark Side, and the episode of Oz. Just a bunch of different things. Some Twilight Zone show on the reboot. But yeah,
it's all kind of weird stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, the last credit for directing was in 2016. He did 2 episodes of a show called Graves. So I mean, still acting today. He's just a cool dude. And the stylisticness of this movie makes me wish he had directed more movies.
Right.
I would have liked to see him explore his style more and get more. Right. Yeah. And maybe on these episodes. Yeah. Get it under control. There's lots of actors in it. But the one that you're going to talk about, the one that steals the show, and the only one we're going to talk about here is the only Randy Quaid. And I think we have a picture of him from the movie, and I just loved this shot of him. He just has one of those faces, and his voice and his mannerisms, and just you're watching him. And
he's so creepy in this. This is the most different Randy Quaid role I've ever seen.
He played this perfectly.
Yeah.
He had the 1950s father vibe, and he also had the serial killer cannibal evil vibe.
Yeah.
And yeah, and he was just off. I love watching him in movies. It feels like he's the opposite of his brother. Like Dennis Quaid, he has that kind of like Tom Hanks everyman sort of vibe. Like you're going to cast him when you need the generic guy hero in your movie. Whereas Randy Quaid, it feels like he just has that style that's perfect for a character actor, where he can just really chew these roles. And like,
is it the Ron and Clint Howard dichotomy?
It is the Ron and Clint Howard. Yeah. Yep. The Sean Penn, Chris Penn. Yeah. Stephen Baldwin, William Baldwin, Alec Baldwin. Yeah.
Martin Sheen. What's his brother's name?
Emilio Estevez.
Yeah, Emilio Estevez.
Those not quite as much for me. I think both of them could take lead roles where they don't quite get as character-y. But I guess Emilio Estevez, he's a little more distinct. Plus, he was in Mighty Ducks and Men at Work. So was Charlie Sheen. I love the Emilio Estevez and Charlie Sheen. I could just talk for 5 minutes about those actors.
Well,
let's move on to the good and the bad before this digresses further.
So I'll start with the good. This movie is beautiful. I mean, the shot composition in this movie is amazing. It's like the Michael Bay of 80s horror, where like every shot is supposed to be like the best shot you've ever seen. And so there's just too many to choose from. So I got a picture of the title credits where it says Parents, and it has the old Oldsmobile pulling up that really establishes the 1950s aesthetic. But I love this because this is like right at the end of this shot where they put up the title Parents, and then it like rips apart. So it like shows what this movie is about perfectly. It's this aesthetic, but then it has this weird, like kind of semi-violent rip in it. Like it's everything in this movie is unsettling. And that's my second big good, is that just the general weirdness. It does this really great job of making normal things seem very eerie. Like everything in the movie is unsettling, but all they're doing is like sitting down to a family dinner, driving through a lovely neighborhood, going to school.
Right? Can I? Oh, go ahead.
No, jump in.
I want to stop you right here because you've done too good. And I'd like to read you the top 2 good I have written down on my notes. Word for word, what I wrote. Great framing / cool shots. And now I'm going to read the second one. Everyone's creepy. All of it is just a little bit off. We have the exact same 2 main goods. This movie does such a great job of just, it's almost like the uncanny valley, right? Like there's just something off about it all.
Things are like too perfect in a way. Well, so on the flip side of that, I want to say that there isn't a lot of stuff in this that is like actually scary, but we have one part, I call it casual violence. It's when the guidance counselor or the school psychiatrist, whatever she is, she's locked in the pantry and she's getting stabbed at, but she doesn't scream. And the music, whereas the music has been like really dissonant and eerie through the whole thing while they're doing very normal things, the music here is very like kind of
Looney Tunesy, cartoony.
Yeah. And so it's taking something that should be scary and making it rather normal, casual even. And so they just do this really crazy flip. I mean, and there are just so many examples. There's Michael and Sheila, was that her name?
Yeah.
She is like obviously is just so much taller than him. I think she was like in real life she was a few years older.
She was like 4 years older than him. Yeah.
Which makes some other things kind of weird. But she's just clearly so much taller than him. But when they are first talking to each other and they're walking, they like do this camera thing where they like change in size, right? Like he or she starts to go down some steps and he stays towards the top, so he's taller than her, and it's just like this beautiful long tracking shot.
Oh yeah, that's a great scene.
I mean,
I love the dialogue there. Like, are you really from the moon?
Yeah, and it's so weird.
It felt so like what kids would actually talk about and how they would actually believe another child who's blatantly lying to them.
I may have had that exact conversation, or maybe told that exact lie. I don't know.
Right.
But my last good is awesome nightmares. The nightmare sequences, while I don't think that they always like pay off, and I'm not really sure exactly like what they're for, I think that the overall tone of them are awesome. And I really wish that like the Nightmare on Elm Street movies would have taken a note from some of this stuff.
Well, we can pull up the picture Bloody Pillow in this because that gives an example. This is the first nightmare and you're like, oh man, okay, this is what we're in for.
I absolutely love that I mean, just the gag, right? The shot where they have a sheet pulled tight with a pillow sitting on it. And he jumps into it and goes into this pool of blood and it swirls around like it's all slow motion. It's just super surreal. I mean,
and you don't know it's a dream until he jumps into the bed.
Right. Well, and then at first, because you don't really know what this movie is about yet, it takes you a little bit to try and figure it out. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so good. My bads. This kind of goes right into the bad. I feel like there's just a lot of red herrings and a lot of loose ends. There's just a lot of things thrown at us to where I can't really tell, or I couldn't tell while watching the movie, like, what am I supposed to latch on to here other than that things are just creepy and not quite right? So we have his dreams. Like, what are his dreams all about? Exactly. We have the part, the sausage attack, where he's standing in the cupboard again, where the counselor gets killed later in the movie. And the sausage. I don't even think that's a dream. I think that's just his imagination. Yeah, it's like a daydream, maybe. Right. Because his mom opens the door and she's like, "Oh, supper's at 6."
Which is a great line.
So, like, it just, man, I just like can't put my finger on it. And so for me, it was hard to find something to get grounded to in this movie. Like, okay, what is the normal of this world? Like, what am I supposed to actually relate to? And maybe that's the point of the whole thing. Like,
Yeah,
the
I have a
normal
couple
is
theories
weird.
and questions. Yeah.
Well, that's all I really have for bad. And that might go along with that criticism of the tone is just so weird that you like people just couldn't latch onto it. And maybe that's the same for me. So
yeah, I mean, it's a strange tone, but it's consistent, like you said. Okay, I have a couple more good, and you touched on them. So this is a beautiful film. Not only are the shots like just so well composed, and we have one, the 1950s, and it's a little after the title sequence. I love this shot, and this is emblematic of like every other shot in this film. It's framed amazing. They're cool angles. It's angular. It's 3-dimensional. Like the sets are amazing. The costumes are amazing. Like, and this feels like spying on a married couple in the 1950s. Who knows if it's accurate or not, but it has that feel.
It rings true.
It rings true, and it just sets a tone, and it's such a beautiful shot. And like even like when they sit down to dinner and they have we don't have a shot of it, but they have the cookbooks kind of blurred in the foreground at an angle, and then you're watching it through like an open frame that leads to the dining room, and then they're framed by that, and then you have them all three in a triangle there, and it just beautiful shots.
After they kill the counselor and they cook her, she's dead,
right?
But the shot is of the family like looking down at the meat. Her body.
We have a shot of this, right?
I don't think so. I don't think we got that. This is a shot of her being cooked. But it's right after this, they serve her, and like the family, like all three of them, they're looking down.
Oh yeah.
So it's kind of like she's still alive in some way. Like it's like you, the viewer, have been killed and cooked, and now you're like looking up at the people who are going to eat you or something.
Yeah,
it's brilliant shots.
Yeah, just brilliant shots. I love the soundtrack. I love the score because I think you'd hit it on the head. Like there's this normalcy, and it's like the kind of worm that's eating away underneath the surface layer, right? And I think a lot of it has to do with the score. It's very like drone and ambient and dark textures, and they just hold these notes, and there's a little bit of movement in the soundscape, but not a lot. And then and then there's so many shots where they choose to have no sound at all, no soundtrack at all, no music. And then it's punctuated 3 or 4 times with hits from the 50s or really kind of upbeat, happy music. Well,
at the very beginning, during the title, sorry to jump in.
No, jump in.
I think it shows maybe what the movie is about perfectly, because it has that what's that style of music called? Like is it some sort of somber or whatever? It's like bump bum bum bum.
Right.
And the that screechy trumpet is playing underneath of it, like, in my opinion, semi ruining it, because it's just like so grating. But that's maybe the theme, right? Is that you have like this beautiful thing that's on the surface, but just underneath of it, like you said, the worm eating through this thing that's kind of off key underneath of it.
Yeah,
it's playing through.
It's just brilliant. So that's really all I have for good, besides what you've talked about. The bad is, and again, maybe they're doing this on purpose. I can't fault them for it, but it's aimless and it's slow because there's no story question.
Exactly. Yeah.
The kid is our protagonist, and we know that he's trying to figure situations out, but there's never, until the very end of the film, there's never any statement of like how the audience is going to know that he has solved his problem.
Right.
So it's very much,
though.
He hasn't, but it's very much like a slice of life where we're as opposed to a story. Right. And that's not a fault in and of itself. It's just a stylistic choice. And you watch certain I mean, there's lots of French New Wave cinema from the 60s where you're just watching people do stuff.
Well, I think there is a story question, but it comes much later.
It comes very, very late. And it's by that time, it's not really.
It's too late.
It's not. Yeah, it's almost like.
Too late.
Yeah, I mean the whole movie. I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'm like, okay, I get this. This is not normal. This is creepy. But what are you going to do about it? What's going on? Why are we watching this? And so, as an exercise in just like watching this creepy family do creepy things perfectly, but I think that's its weakness as a film, especially in like a horror genre. I mean, this doesn't really feel horror. It feels horror adjacent. This mainly felt like a satire to me.
Yeah. Oh,
like there are horror elements and there are comedic elements, but more than anything, it felt like a satire, but I didn't really know what they were attacking, what they were satirizing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's
potentially the 1950s, because so while the 89, how long ago was that? Like 30 years. So while it wouldn't relate to me because I would have only been a few years old in 89, but say you were in your 20s or 30s, then you would maybe remember the cultural leftovers of the 1950s a little bit better. Like Leave It to Beaver reruns might still be on, right? And so
right,
maybe
like if you were to pull
the
the laugh track out of Leave It to Beaver, would it feel like you're watching this?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So into Schlock, I got a couple questions for you.
Hit me.
So what I think this movie is about is two things: the fear of growing up and the banality of adult life.
Okay. Dig into that a little bit deeper for me.
Well,
that's a big word,
I
banality.
Mean, these dreams and these nightmares until later in the film when we actually see someone get murdered and we see them find a real dead body. We don't know if it's all in this kid's head.
Right.
And he's obviously traumatized by things that his parents are doing. And again, we're not sure if they're doing anything wrong, right? It just feels like he's maybe jealous of his father. There's a weird relationship dynamic.
Weird Oedipal complex.
Yeah.
Going on.
Yeah. And he has a weird relationship with the mother too. I mean, all of them seem slightly off kilter, but I think like it's a metaphor for like him trying to spy on the adult world. Like when they're watching him play bridge, it's such an awkward scene, but nothing bad happens. It's just adults being really boring, and the banality of like everyday life of like trying to put on that smiling face for your boss when you go to a dinner.
See, I watched that and I thought there was the undertone of like, are they swingers? Like, is that like what's going on here? There's definitely like weird sexual undertones throughout the whole movie. And so what I took from it, and this like totally went out of the window once they actually found the dead body. I was thinking that this movie is about like the stories the kids make up, because I think that the central question, and Sheila asks, and I think this is the last time we see her, and then she's just out of the movie. But she asks Michael questions along the lines of like, do you really know what your dad does all day long? Right. Your parents, you're a kid, you get sent off to school for 8 hours. Your parents are gone. Like, who are they really?
It's children trying to understand the adult world.
And in the same way that like she tells him that she's from the moon, right? Parents tell us that they're just like these average normal people when really maybe they're cannibals. And so I have a pic of when he walks in on them in the living room on a sheet. I call it the kids' point of view, kids POV. So here, like they're on a sheet in the living room, I believe, in their skivvies. And it looks to me like they're having sex. And it looks to me like they have lipstick smeared on their faces and their necks, right? They're making out and necking and whatnot, and their kid caught them. And so to me, I'm thinking like, okay, you're a kid, you don't really understand a lot of this yet, and you catch your parents doing the deed. What stories do you tell yourself? Like,
Right, they
oh,
were
mommy and
fighting
daddy
each
were
other,
wrestling,
and there was blood. So were they trying to, cannibalize each other?
right? So we see here that I mean, this looks like lipstick to me, or Kool-Aid. But later, when we see him sort of remembering this scene, like they're covered in like gore, right? Like it's chunky blood. So I'm like, oh, this is just all made up in his head. But then nope, they're actually cannibals. They killed that teacher and they're going to eat him. Like,
right.
So yeah, and I'm so like, I don't know what
it's
this is about.
interesting because like nothing until we find out they're cannibals, nothing they do is as traumatic as his dreams are having. But you feel like that some of these are repressed memories for something he saw before they moved here.
Oh, potentially. Yeah.
Right. And so let's bring up the picture, how you see your family, because this is where the movie kind of changes.
Mm-hmm.
Like
where he's clearly got some psychological thing going on, like some trauma going on.
Yeah. So a lot of trauma. And like, again, this could be in a horror movie. This could be in a drama, a satire, a comedy. You could go so many ways with this, but this is really where the outside character of the guidance counselor, the school psychologist, really comes in and tries to understand him.
Mm-hmm.
But also, like, again, we have not seen anything in this film that would give him this level of trauma at this point in time. But we know that they had to move here for a certain reason.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a weird question that he asked. Like ever since we moved here, we've had nothing but leftovers. What are we eating the leftovers of?
Yeah, it's like he's already in the back of his mind. He's like, we're eating people.
Yeah.
Right. And so he's kind of getting this little vegetarian thing of like, hey, wait a minute, man, I'm just gonna have some more carrots.
So clearly they're cannibals, and maybe potentially we're supposed to know this already, because I think like the posters for this movie said like "Daddy is a cannibal" or "Daddy ist ein Cannibal," or
right
in German or something like that. So I think maybe you were supposed to go into it already knowing that, and so maybe that's something that I kind of missed. However, so one of the things I read on the World Wide Web is that these people are potentially witches.
That's what I was just going to ask you.
Because he knows some sort of spell or enchantment.
Well, that thing at the beginning where it's like, tell us something that about yourself or that other people don't know. And so the girl, it's like, well, if you make a martini with an onion instead of an olive, it's called a Gibson. Right.
Which is a secret of her family, right? Because her mom makes the iced teas Long Island, right? She's putting alcohol. So that's a sort of maybe a dirty secret.
And so then our main character stands up and he's like, well, if you take a black cat and you boil it and then you crush its bones, then you can become invisible. And you're like, oh, this is
all right.
Okay, awkward. Like that's where the teacher should be like, well, that's not true. And don't do that to your cats. And like,
yeah.
But like that's clearly witchcrafty, right?
Well, and the dad says like, if you tell everybody our
we're gonna get burned.
Yeah, they'll burn us at the stake,
right? So like, yeah, and just the whole idea of his alchemy-esque abilities at the beautifully titled Toxico.
Yeah. I mean, there's really a lot of great stuff going on in this movie. It just, for some reason, it just doesn't land.
We were talking about it at the beginning that, like I said, this is not a mediocre movie at all. It's both a really great movie and a not good movie at the exact same time, which is a really strange thing to say. It's a compliment. I don't know how you did it. Like, I wish the movie was just straight up amazing, but that narrative through line isn't there for me. So it just kind of, it lulls when it shouldn't. Right. And the punches don't hit as hard.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, there's lots to chew up on this.
Yeah, it's definitely a thinker for sure. Like, tell me this. I think this is probably one of the last things I have. The weird sexual undertones in it. Like Well, just the dad with the mom, the potential Oedipal complexes, the Sheila and Michael. Did you feel weird when she was like in the freezer and she's like, take off your shirt? And I'm like watching it, I'm like, this is a little kid. What's going on here? And this girl is clearly much older than him.
It was very awkward. And the fact that they were drinking wine, but it also, I think, it takes place in the 50s. It's called Parents. Clearly that's some of the satire was just the repression, I think, of the 50s.
Yeah. Good note.
And,
sure.
The other thing, so I think that you get these little bursts of people, flipping out because of the repression. And so you have like the drink wine, take your shirt off, eat people, murder. But the other thing that has to do with oppression and goes back to the soundtrack and the creepiness of it all is the amount of crunch. There are people cutting carrots, cutting celery, and you hear the sound effect really loud. You have people biting crunchy vegetables through the whole film, and the sound is really prominent. And it just feels like that, like someone's angry, right? You're like, you're cutting something harder than you should. You're biting something harder than you should. And it just gives that underlying feeling of tension and repression. And I think there's just a lot of subtle things in here that are like brilliant. And I wish it would have, it's like they hit the baseball and it just smashed out of here, but it was out. It wasn't a home run. It was,
The dad gives a lot of really great like dad speeches and they're really weird. And I think one of the first ones he gives to Michael is he says something like, there's a lot of dark places and you don't have to be scared of any of them except for the one in here.
This is the darkest one. And you're like, okay. I know we're running out of time, but are the grandparents cannibals?
I don't know. I was trying to figure that out. And I think if the movie is not actually about real cannibalism and it's about like what a kid has imagined or whatever, then I think that movie makes, or that ending makes like a great stinger at the end. Like, oh, are they? But
because it zooms in on that sandwich and it looks like a normal sandwich, but like who puts a roast beef sandwich on a kid's nightstand when he goes to bed? Right. So is he traumatized about what his parents did, so he doesn't want to eat meat at all? Or like, I guess it's that question of like,
I would love to have a roast beef sandwich on my nightstand.
Right. Is it human flesh or is it just a roast beef sandwich? Right. People are Soylent Green.
Clearly, I mean, there's a ton to talk about in this movie. Really, to give it due justice, like you'd have to go through the movie shot by shot.
This is one of the first movies that like, go watch this and then tell us what you think, because I'm baffled, but in a good way.
Yeah, tell us what you think. This is all the time we have for this week. Next week, we're watching... 2 weeks. That's right. We're back on our 2-week schedule. It's a little ditty from, I think, the 2010s called GPS. It looks like a maybe a murder mystery thriller. I don't know. I have a very special reason for picking it, so you're going to have to tune in next time to check that out. Anyway, until next time, I am Darby Ellis Lewis Wilson. This is Chris Anonymous. We've been compelled by Schlock, and we will see you in 2 weeks. Peace out, guys.
Hey! Schlock, schlocky, schlock, schlock, schlock. I am